Okay, so over to you. I'll give you a quick introduction, everyone. So Shawn Yaeger is the VP Sales for Dataswift and is a very experienced technologist and entrepreneur and has been doing this kind of sales presentation and pitch presentation for a large part of his career, is an absolute master of it. And he's offered to give as much time as possible to each of you to feedback on the way you present and what the content is of your presentations. And he's offered to do that as a way of trying to support all of the presentations that you put forward. Shannon, it was originally scheduled for 5:30. We moved it up so that people would have more time to internalize. If you want to get out of here.
That's great.
Okay. I was going to say, anyone who can only meet later on, I'm going to post a message after we're done here that we'll do another session later on if they want.
Yeah, and I'm around, so it's yeah, no problem for me.
Cool. So I'll pass it over to you now, Shawn. Shawn, you can talk for 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll do one-to-one. I'll coordinate the one-to-one sessions myself. So whenever you're done, you can pass it back over to me.
Terrific. Okay. Well, let's see. Good morning, at least for me, everyone from Nashville, Tennessee, where it's about 7:39. Let's see. That is not what I wanted to show you. Let me go back. Are you seeing the How to Craft a Winning Pitch?
Yes.
Please. Great. Thank you. Okay. So I'm breaking one of my key rules here in showing you this slide full of text, which is not not ideal at all. But I wanted to leave you with these three key points, and that is that I more often than not say to people, it's about narrative and numbers. And I think that's the one thing to take away is when you are creating a pitch to move someone to take action, which I think is what all pitches are for, particularly if you think, and a lot of my background has been, as with Jonathan, has been in compelling investors to write a check or otherwise to invest something of value to them into something you're building, that the key here is that they need to be invested in the story. And so it's about narrative, it's about storytelling, as much, if not more, surprisingly to some, as the product you're building. And so I, a long time ago, earned a computer science degree and wrote code for about 6 months and then got pulled over to the dark side of biz dev and sales and all that good stuff. But the point being, I can empathize with those who so often, you know, we bring something into the world, it's our baby, and we want to tell everybody about it. And that's a very natural position to take. But in fact, particularly if you're asking someone to invest, now, this weekend and the judging criteria or process rather, strictly speaking, they're not investing, right? They're not writing a check out of a venture fund. They're not writing a check out of their own wallets as an angel investor, but they are effectively making a decision that will drive the grant, the money that can get awarded rather. And so I think it's wise to take that posture, to take that position as if you were raising money. Now, some of you, and you know, we don't want to presume, but some of you may take your idea and launch a business. You may take that further. And so I think this is good for those purposes as well. But really, when someone is making this sort of decision, believe it or not, they are, and this is backed by science, not just one person's opinion, they're making an emotional decision. As much as they may like to think they're making a rational decision, they need to be emotionally connected to your story. And more so, and I'll get into this as we go through the slides, they need to be emotionally connected to who you're helping, right? They need to really, really see and empathize with your protagonist. And so if we think about this as a narrative, then I advise, and we'll talk more in the detail, that you work to get them connected to that protagonist, that person that you're going to turn into a superhero. And then secondly, numbers, right? So it's about impact. And the way that they will most effectively come around to seeing that your product, your solution is the best thing they've ever seen is to care about the impact that it will make. Now, for an investor, that generally is a financial decision, and those numbers may be your financial model. I think for this weekend, it's really more about the impact. And so there's very little time in these 48 hours to do the kind of research, the weeks of development that would go, pardon me, into a, let's say, venture-ready pitch. But as much as you can in this time, what I advise is that you develop numbers, even if they're high level, even if they're rough, to show the panelists, to show the judges the impact that you can make. So let me pause there and see if there are any questions. Oh, okay. So with that, we're going to step through the slide format, and it is adapted from a template that was created by Guy Kawasaki way back in the day. Guy was the very first evangelist for Apple. Some of you may know, and he's gone on to do so many brilliant things since then, but he has a sort of 10-slide magic format. You'll see all sorts of variations of this format all over the internet. You'll see various venture capital firms floating their ideal templates. There is no one true answer, but this is the format we've chosen. And so for the sake of the judges, the panelists being able to evaluate everyone equally, we are absolutely asking that everyone stick to this format. So of course, the title slide, and you are free to do what you want within the slides. All we ask and require is that you stick to this same number of slides and order of slides, again, for the sake of them making an apples to apples comparison. So here, it's really not just about the name of your project, your team, but it's about the elevator pitch. And so as you record this delivery, this first slide is really that punchy so-called elevator pitch. And for those who may not know, the idea emerged from what would you say to hook someone on your idea if you only had the time it took from, say, going from the lobby to floor 10, right? If you had those 30, 45 seconds and you needed to compel someone to make a decision, what would that sound like? And there are lots of guides on the internet you can find. You can Google for elevator pitch and find some great guidance there. I'm so sorry. But the idea here is to really make that powerful opening and to talk to them about who you help, how you help them, and why it matters. There's another way to do this that I really love, which is called the wow, how, and now. And so the wow is a grab. It's a powerful statement about the impact you're making. The how is well, the how. So we start with the impact, the outcome. We go to the how we're doing that, and then we substantiate it with a now. And that perhaps could be, what is going on in the world with specific reference to the solution you're building that makes this timely, right? So grab my attention, tell me how you're accomplishing this fantastic outcome, and then connect me to why now is the right time. So that's the wow, how, and now. Okay, so the problem solution sort of pair, for those of you who've followed it all, the lean startup methodology and some of what's come out of Silicon Valley in the US, the higher level concept is that we should obsess about the problem, not the solution, right? If we cannot feel passionately, if we don't feel passionately about connecting to a problem, which of course is what this entire weekend is about, it's terribly unfortunate and obvious to say that we have a significant problem. But the idea in terms of the pitch is that we, as I said, often make that mistake of leading with our product, our solution, our baby, as it were, right, that we've created. Where what really matters is make me care, make me understand, make me see that you're solving a meaningful problem, right? Otherwise, it's a so-called solution looking for a problem. And so this is where you, again, make that emotional connection and ideally that quantitative numbers connection to your audience by describing the size, the scope, the impact of this problem. Now, in other arenas, it could be a need. If we're building Uber for X, as everyone loves to talk about, then it could be a need, it could be a want, but I think certainly in the context of COVID-19 and Hack From Home, clearly we have some real problems to solve. Then it's about the solution. And so by solution, which is a word that we get tossed at us a lot, we actually do mean the solution. We aren't being cutesy and talking about another word for product. We're saying for the problem that we've just described, for the problem that we've hopefully just driven home to you, the audience, in this case, the panelists, the judge, here is our solution, right? Not just a piece of software, but it is the salve for the pain. And that's really important, which is to say, you haven't just built this neat widget, but you've built something that actually once launched, once out in the market, once available as an open source project, however you will distribute this, is actually capable of solving that problem. Now, this, I should say in a little more detail, certainly should highlight some of the finer points, or rather I should say some of the stronger points of your solution. So this may be that your top 3 key features, your your so-called magic moments. If any of you have sort of dug into product development and some of what goes on in those circles, they talk about magic moments, right? If we're building a new mobile app, and we know that, and my numbers are a little rusty here, but the average individual will uninstall 70% of the mobile apps they install within the first few days. And so from the standpoint of user experience, it's crucial to have those magic moments. Wow, that is so cool. That really grabbed me. I'm going to keep this app on my precious home screen, which is prime real estate. So by all means, in this one slide, and by the way, we should say the entire idea of a pitch like this is in fact to impose constraints, right? So we know just conveying everything that's fantastic about what you're building is incredibly challenging in these, I believe, 7 slides. And that is in fact the point. I forgot who said it, but constraint breeds creativity, right? Which I believe is very true. And so all that to say, it is certainly challenging to get all of that in this slide, but what it causes us to do, and I've been through 100 of these, my own and helping others, it causes us to distill our thinking. Now, again, in 48 hours, it's really hard to have time to reflect and to distill thinking, but that's really the idea, is what do you really want them to take away about your solution? Now, the X factor, we debated this one, and we thought it was important to give you this extra slide, right? This is the so-called underlying magic, as some will say. So the prior slide being the higher level impact and the meaningful way in which you're solving a problem with your solution. We then get into, okay, now what's really special, right? What's the secret sauce? What's the underlying magic? What's the X factor? And I believe why this is important is it may well be that other teams, and certainly others across the globe outside of this hackathon, are building other solutions to similar or same problems. And so here it's about what really makes this special. And you're completely open to, again, choose what in your product, your web app, your mobile app, whatever it is that you're building, to really convey that. What makes your solution special? In other words, another way to think about it is if you were going to go out and protect the intellectual property, if you could acquire patents or trademarks or any other IP protection, that's another filter, another way to think about this. What is it that if you had $50,000 to spend on lawyers, what would you go out and protect? That's one way I would advise to think about this slide. Now, impact. In a traditional investor presentation, this would be perhaps called opportunity or market, right? So the way of thinking about this, and I just sort of cast it in those terms, to say if you were going out to raise $500,000 in seed funding from a venture capital firm, how would you communicate to them the scope of the impact? How many thousands or millions of people are you going to help? How many geographic markets might you reach? Ultimately, how many customers, and I use that term loosely because it could well be that these are citizens that are not buying or otherwise acquiring a traditional service from you, but need your help. And perhaps your product, your solution is free and open source in that regard. But either way, how many people can you help? Another way to think about this, and I mentioned it in the opening slide, is one way to weave a fantastic thread through the entire presentation, through the entire narrative, again, understanding that we have very limited time this weekend, is to create a protagonist, right? To create a persona. And so if we think of Janine, came just out of the blue here. If we think about Janine as our protagonist, if she is the person around whom I am going to tell my story, in my audience, I want them to care about Janine. Janine might be, she might be a suburban mom dealing with, homeschooling, dealing with having her 3 children there all the time, limited ability to do the sorts of daily things that they want to do. But the point is, for my audience, I create this persona. I get them to care and connect with Janine. And then impact, I talk about how many thousands, tens of thousands, millions of Janines there are that we can help, right? So that's really what we're doing here is we're saying the impact is of this size and scope, ideally be connected back to this persona that I've already created when I've talked about the problem and solution, right? Janine has this problem. Here's the solution. There are 5 million Janines in North America. there's my impact, right? That's one way to go about it. And then last but certainly not least, the team. Now, my key piece of advice here is do not be humble, right? You want to communicate to the judges, to the panelists, to your audience, how specifically and wonderfully qualified your team is to be the ones to build this solution. And again, I will, by habit, sort of fall back on the type of presentation that's targeted to raise capital, but I again think it's still useful. The phrase that often gets thrown around, distasteful perhaps though it may be, is that investors bet on jockeys, not horses, right? We are the jockeys. We as the team are the jockeys. And so some will in fact even advise that you put the team slide at the very beginning. You know, in this case, it's neither here nor there. Point being, it's important. If investors bet on the team, the founders, the jockeys, as it were, we need to show them that first, there's a problem we're solving. Second, there's a solution to that problem that's feasible and it's possible to build. Third, that there's a sizable enough opportunity and impact that they should care about this. And then one of the final ingredients is great. If I, as an investor, panelist, judge, see that there's a huge problem to solve, see that there's a feasible solution, see that the impact and the outcomes are meaningful, why should I bet on you, right? That's their thinking. Because it could be this other team that comes into their office the next day with a similar approach, and they're the better jockeys, right? So I'm underscoring and over making this point to say, don't be humble. And so here, what you want to do is call out the experience that your team has. Call out relevant companies, organizations. Feel free to add logos and names, brag, drop names, as it were, about former or current employers. Show them. And now, this does not mean that if you, for example, are early in your career, if you're a university student, that does not mean by any means that you don't have the right to convey the power and the experience of your team. I'm just saying, if collectively as a team, you've got those credentials, share them. If, for example, you're much earlier in your career, if you're a university student, if you're a high school student, there are still lots of points, I'm sure, in your experience. Talk about what you've shipped, right? Talk about, talk about how many commits or various GitHub projects you're attached to, whatever it is that you may want to convey. It doesn't mean you've got to be 20 years in your career with a bunch of blue chip so-called logos on your CV. But however you best can, again, don't pull punches, don't be humble, show them why you're the right team to bet on. And then lastly, this is a convenience of bundling the information up for the panelists, is, as you recall, you have one link that you're able to submit in addition to your pitch and your recording of your pitch. And so this could be a link to a Dropbox folder containing wireframes. It could be an Envision prototype live on the web. It could be whatever you choose to be, or rather choose to use. And so for the convenience of the panelists, we're asking you to insert that link. You certainly could embed. You can get clever. This is Google Slides. Probably most of you know it. Understanding that this will be exported as a PDF. But however you wish to do so, you can embed that link. And I think with that, that is it. So I'll pause, and then Jonathan, if you're still there, we'll turn it over for whatever remaining time we have.
Absolutely, I am. Thanks very much, Shawn.
Certainly.
Before we do one-to-one sessions, does anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask straight away? Go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah. Okay, so for the team page, you said to call out the experience your team has. Does that include mentors?
Oh, by all means. That's a great question. Right. So yes, in fact, once again, in that sort of typical VC approach, it includes your advisors, which in this case is your mentors. So by all means.
Okay. Well, thanks.
You bet.
Any other questions?
On the slide formatting, I understand we have to keep the same order, same topics. Do you want that same common dark background with the logo, so we're not modifying the background?
Oh, no, you can do whatever you wish with the format. That was just a simple, clean template for you to take and run with.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
You bet.
Any other overview questions? Go ahead.
When you set the solution page, you really want it to be the salve for the paint. So basically, just like why exactly this is going to work for this exact problem and the scope of it.
I think it is. Yes, and in short, yes. And another way to think about that is the solution is more than the product, right? Which gets maybe a little esoteric. But it could, for example, be that you have, again, in 48 hours, we don't expect miracles to happen, although we're seeing some pulled off. It's incredible what's going on. It may include partners. It may include distribution. It may include that you have an idea conceptually to do a deal with, I'm making this up, I don't know, Whole Foods. Maybe you've got somebody at Whole Foods who's going to carry your product, right? So that would be part of, that would be a broader definition of solution than just the product you're building.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, let's do some one-to-ones. So the way I'm going to do this is for anyone who's on the call until there's no one left on the call, I'm going to call on you one at a time to give sort of an option for 1 or 2 minutes to just tell the story of what you're working on with your project. If you've already done your pitch or you know what it's going to look like and are comfortable speaking to the format of the slides, please do that, because that'll give Shawn a better foundation for giving you direct feedback. But if you haven't done that yet, that's perfectly okay. Just talk about your project for 1 to 2 minutes, and then Shawn will give a little bit of feedback as to areas about it that he might highlight or offer feedback in terms of what you might change or anything like that. And then you can take that away to going out and building the rest of the actual pitch deck. Okay? So I might start with you, Monique, if that's okay. Do you want to take 1 or 2 minutes, talk about your project, and then Shawn can give some feedback after that. Obviously, if any of you don't want to do a one-to-one feedback session, that's perfectly okay. You can just say so.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Cool. So I'll kick start then, Shawn.
How many?
Start. So yeah, so the problem that we are trying to solve is that people started practicing social distancing, and they want to avoid going out and avoid a crowd where possible. So they want to get some food and essentials to keep them going. So they may go online for grocery shopping, but there's a queue to get onto the website. And after selecting the items that they need, they realize there isn't a delivery slot available in the next 2 weeks. And then when they go to the physical stores, because there's no real-time information, so there's no guarantee for them to get what they want after more queuing. And also when they are in the store, they will just grab everything they see into the trolley because they don't know how much food they need for the household, and it's better to buy more now than having not enough later. And the stores, they share the pain as well from a different angle. So some shops, they have the shelves empty too quickly, leaving very unhappy customers. And some of them, especially the local independent stores, they are well stocked, but no one goes to them because no one heard of them or just purely lack of information. So it's kind of a downward spiral for the economy in general. So the solution that we are proposing is Shop Aid. Essentially, we are building an application to help customers to understand the stock information by collective intelligence, and the application will also suggest them to the stores that will have more stock and basically less crowded route as well. So that's it from me for now.
Love it. I'm shedding all pretense of being unbiased because I'm suffering from the same problem here in Nashville and trying to use Amazon to order groceries. I think that's fantastic. And I think, and this is something that is so challenging, is if you can condense the description of the problem, and this I think is so much about scripting, it's right, again, in as much as there's time, I appreciate that it's a crazy weekend. If you can try to get, there's a rule of thumb that someone way back when in marketing established, and I believe it to be true, is that generally people will take away 3 points from any given chunk of content, and so for a given slide, in this case, the problem slide, they're probably going to take away at best 3 points. And I should have mentioned that in my opening. And so I think if you can distill, because you described a very complex interconnected problem, which I think we all see, if you could distill that perhaps into talking about, I'm throwing this out, first of all, we need to connect, of course, with a persona, the shopper, right? This individual, the mom, the husband, whoever it is. And the problem with online ordering, which you brilliantly described, I've just tried this morning. I woke up to get another delivery slot and failed. The problem with what's going on with stock in brick and mortar stores, and ultimately the store's problem, if I heard you correctly, in trying to do their own demand planning, which they presumably believe they're brilliant at, but I think this collective intelligence is fantastic. So if you can distill that down, I believe your elevator pitch could probably be 30 to 45 seconds and everybody will get it. And so my takeaway in short is distillation, which is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
But I think it's great.
Okay, that's good. So basically, you have 30 to 45 seconds on the problem, and would that become similar amount of time on the solution as well? What's
Well,
your
if you think about it, and this is again something, forgive me, I forgot to mention, is that the recording has to be 3 minutes. That's hard. That is extremely hard. I would imagine some of you will have draft recordings that contain all kinds of creative swear words, because you'll realize, as I did, right, I committed that mortal sin. Jonathan kindly gave me 15 to 20 minutes and I just bulldozed right past it. So it's really tough. And I think rehearsal, practice, scripting is what's key. And so to deliver, not accounting for the, well, there is no fluff. Okay, not accounting for the link slide, there are 6 slides. And so if we divide 3 minutes by 6 slides, haven't had enough coffee to do the math in my head yet, but that's what we get per slide. So in short, yeah, punchy, probably, what is that? 15, to 30 seconds per slide, depending on how you weight it.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Adam, why don't you go next?
Right. Okay. So you actually kind of caught me slightly on the hop, because I don't have the wow yet, but I'm going to give it a go. Okay. I'm going to skip the wow, because it's a platform for rapidly sharing trusted COVID solutions. So it's a little bit like Wikipedia meets Rotten Tomatoes for how we help with things such as mental health, physical health, community health, and societal health. And so what we are wanting to achieve is enabling the kind of collation, validation, and rapid sharing of all those sort of amazing solutions that are out there that have actually been proven to work in the real world. And so the key thing with this is that there are people that are kind of collating ideas, but you don't know how to trust them. And so the problem is actually that there's so many different solutions out there that kind of stresses people out, number one. And number two, once they even find a solution, they don't know whether they can trust it. So this platform's aim is to be able to deliver the access and the trust level. And so we're going to have, and what we're going to have is like a voting system where you're going to have citizens, which will be like normal people, and then experts who will be people that have actually worked on and delivered the solution or got some sort of academic credibility, etc. And so in 1 or 2 minutes, I think that's probably enough.
Yeah, no, that's great, Adam. And I think your opener used a tactic that is fantastic, which is X for Y. So you are Rotten Tomatoes for finding trustworthy COVID solutions, and that's my fumbling attempt at it. But I think that X for Y is powerful, particularly in a consumer product, right? And so the other thing I would mention is that I believe you have a great opportunity to, again, create a persona, to create someone I empathize with, because once again, I feel like it's easy for me to see myself as that person. So if Adam is our protagonist, or even rather you to the audience effectively as you're recording this, you're saying something to the effect of, it's one of those, we've all been there, right? Because I think, yeah, we've all gone looking for particular solutions. I was looking for the right kind of cloth face mask last night. We have new guidance in the US, which I won't go into. But the point is, who do I trust? How do I know to trust? I think the mix of expert scoring, as well as, again, that Rotten Tomato audience meter, a critic meter, I forget how they frame it, is great. And so in short, I think the X for Y is powerful. I think you've got an opportunity to almost immediately connect your audience to been there, done that. We've all been there, right? We've all gone looking for something. Most everyone knows Rotten Tomatoes. And so I think, I think that's powerful. I think that's a good way to go.
And just one thing that, just to kind of, just a final little thing on that, is that it is kind of Wikipedia meets Rotten Tomatoes, but we could just focus on the Rotten Tomatoes, because that's actually probably the closest it's to. So do you think it's, because I quite like the kind of story of the two, but also that adds extra kind of like cognitive load by having the two. So what's your thoughts on that?
Great point. So it's a really key point. Is cognitive load, I think, I have probably got 100 ways to convey that, and my teammates know that I am belligerent about making things simpler, so as not to put additional cognitive load on the audience. And so that's a great way to phrase it. So it could well be that you're building Wikipedia plus Rotten Tomatoes for COVID solutions, but maybe the more punchy opener is just to stick to Rotten Tomatoes, and then later you can layer in the of. So again, you nailed it by saying cognitive load. To lessen that is to have a clearer message and a stronger connection.
Yeah, right. Thank you very much, Shawn. Thank you.
Everyone, we're going to be kicked out of here in less than a minute. So let's leave now, come back in, and then we'll take the next one.
You got it.